Hello and welcome back to another video. Today here again on Forza Horizon 5 with my latest Event Lab build, Petroleum Park. I actually started building this track just after Event Lab 2.0 released, around 6 months ago I think now. After building the straight and pit lane, I wasn't really sure where to go with it, and for combinations of reasons, I didn't work on it for ages until a few weeks ago I decided I should finally actually really finish this route if I'm going to build it at all. The first thought I had with this is that I wanted to make the most of the space available and get an idea of how big Event Lab Island was by including a 2-kilometer straight across the whole, actually, island part of the Event Lab Island map. So I made a long straight and added the walling and runoff at either end, and then got to work on a pit lane, which always takes me quite a while. I really enjoy building the pit buildings for these. After this, though, I didn't really have many ideas. I did want to put in an optional chicane on the straight, but having two variations is a bit irritating, because it's almost impossible to place checkpoints in exactly the same place on the bits of the track that are the same. And if you just leave the checkpoints in the same place and make the chicane with walling and stuff, racing line disappears for reasons. Anyway, I now think that the chicanes are probably a bit too narrow and tight anyway for properly close racing, so I may never publish a layout with those chicanes. And that's pretty much where I left it all those months ago, with the addition of a couple of corners that I was slightly unsure about, and like I say, I then didn't touch it for probably at least 5 months' time. By the time I came back to finish the route, the new racing props had been added as well. So to begin with, I focused on adding curbs to the existing part of the track, which probably, again, isn't really the right order. I should really go and finish the track layout first, and the track surface, before I start adding curbing and detailing. The first thing I found is that the corners snap well to other corners, the curbing pieces, and the straights snap well to other straights, but they don't snap to each other very accurately, so it took a bit of fiddling about with, which is a bit of a pain. Anyway, after this, I reworked the first sort of double corner at the end of the straight, so that had a nice even curve on the curbing pieces that I was putting in. I'm avoiding using the new Armco style barriers, because for some reason they're destructible, and if you place destructible props in Event Lab, they don't respawn each lap basically like they do in base game tracks, so they're pretty much useless. I did also take out a few fiddly corners that I was unsure about from the initial build, and put a back straight in, hopefully making the track flow a bit better than it did previously. As the first part of the circuit consisted of a long straight and sharp corners, I had managed to make it with track pieces all at right angles to one another, so I could use the snapping functionality for them. I did want to add some more flowing turns to the remainder of the circuit though, so that wasn't going to work for those. To add more flowing turns, I set step rotation to different amounts for different degrees of corner, snapping each piece together to ensure the surface was smooth before using the rotation to get that corner. And this ensures that the corner stays the same kind of degree of sharpness all the way around, the same radius, I suppose. On this circuit, I'm keeping everything flat, as it's the first time I'm kind of building from scratch like this. On my next project, though, I do plan to try and incorporate some inclines and hills and things for the first time, which I think is going to be a fun challenge. Eventually, though, this is the layout of track that I ended up with. So I had been adding some scenery and detail as I'd been going along, with the pit lane of course and pit garages actually being one of the first things that I built. It is sometimes good to take a break from the actual track layout and construction to add some more other details, because it's kind of a bit more fun and creative than just blindly placing track in straight lines, for example. Isn't terribly exciting. Really though, the details shouldn't be added until the basic track layout at least is built, otherwise more work is undone if you do decide to change the layout at all. And whilst I had added some details when I got bored of doing just plain construction work, the background to the track was still fairly empty, so at this point I started populating it, mostly with grandstands to start with, to give that racetrack feel. In fact, these long rows of grandstands are the only prefab prop that I downloaded and used on this track, Everything else you see here I built from scratch using the props in Event Lab. I also added lighting, barriers, vehicles, cameras, and the sort of thing you might see along the side of a racetrack, but also some trees and shrubberies, of course. Adding lighting always seems to take the longest. You really do need a lot of it for the track to really look good and come alive at night. Luckily, we can now quickly change the time of day in Event Lab to see what effect the lighting is giving and decide what type of light to place where and if we need any more, if there's enough lighting or not, basically. I also decided I should construct a bridge into the infield, which took a bit of figuring out the best location for and how to go about building it and then moving some barriers about to make it work. And right at the end of the build, I suddenly remembered I'd forgotten to rebuild the gantry on the start-finish line with the new starting lights, basically. I did also double-check the checkered finish line was in approximately the correct place before doing this, because you can't quite tell, things aren't terribly accurate in Event Lab. But given it's always going to be the same start point now on Event Lab Island, I should begin to get an idea of where things actually are. And finally, I placed the checkpoints as carefully as I could to minimise track cutting and extending, making sure to leave the possibility of adding the chicane on the straight at a later date without doing all of the checkpoint placing again, and just accepting that we lose that racing line. Like I say though, the chicane is very tight, so I potentially won't make that layout at all. Let me know your thoughts on that one. So after nearly 20 hours of build time, this is the finished route. Surprisingly, it's used under 70% of the prop budget, which isn't as bad as I thought it might be, especially as I wasn't really thinking about this during the build, but I'm hoping that it means less powerful hardware will cope with running this route, at least some of the time, because I would quite like to use this in our racing series. After spending all that time placing all of the lighting, I have of course shared not only a daytime version, but also a nighttime version of this route. I always particularly like the effect of nighttime events on Horizon 5. It takes about 1 minute 30 to complete a lap in low S1 class. I was of course doing it in an Aston Martin DBS, so both day and night blueprints are currently set to 5 laps. However, I may also make a longer length one if we do ever use it in my weekly racing series, the Doge Racing series. So watch out for a longer blueprint if you want to spend more time driving around this track, and also hopefully we'll use this in our racing series in the next few months, so watch out for it there. But do keep an eye out for more blueprints on my Creative Hub, potentially a longer version and potentially some versions with chicanes, if I do ever publish those. And that is going to be all for today's video on my latest Event Lab creation, Petroleum Park. As ever, do let me know your thoughts on this latest build. I always welcome feedback so that I can take it into consideration on my next track. At this point, I'm probably not going to make any edits to this one. And if you've built a route in Event Lab, don't forget to send it in the submission channel over on my Discord, which is linked in this video description. For now though, that is going to be all, so thank you very much for watching, and I will be back with the next one very soon.